Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're going to be chatting tonight about the future of batteries and other things, because electrical vehicles, wind turbines, solar panels, they all promise a carbon-free future. And yes, these innovations help produce carbon emissions, but they all require huge investments, elaborate infrastructure, and technical expertise. Things remote communities in this country just don't have. Not to mention much of the developing world where firewood for cooking, torchlights, and candles is all that's available. Connie Stacey, president and founder of Growing Greener Innovations, has made it her mission to end what she calls energy poverty. In 2014, she left her IT programming job with a simple idea: build a portable, rechargeable battery generator as an alternative to the conventional, loud, noisy, expensive diesel generators. Her invention, trademarked the Grenjen 1000, is quiet, compact, versatile battery. It emits no fumes and it can be used almost everywhere. Connie's got an unbelievably interesting CV. She was the president and founder of Growing Greener Innovations in 2014. Globe and Mail named her one of the 50 top changemakers in 2021. Forum winner, $50,000 pitch for the purse prize in 2020-2021. Global Woman of Vision and World Changing Woman 2019. And CANI, the Canadian Innovators and Entrepreneurs Product Innovation Award, the U.S. Defense Innovation at Tech Connect Summit and Expo Award, professional expertarian in IT programming. She's a speaker, she's a presenter in clean energy, tech, women in tech, and LGBT lead business events. She's an alumnus of the University of Alberta. Connie Stacey, welcome to our show.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
That's a pretty impressive background and a pretty inspirational vision.
Well, thank you. You know what? It sounds great when you say it.
But it's great that you've achieved it.
Yeah, it's been, we've had an uphill battle, but we've, in the last couple of years, really started to see the results of our work. So it's been very rewarding.
So tell me about this, what's it called? The greenery?
The Grenjen?
The Grenjen.
Yeah, you know what? I wanted something I could trademark in terms of a name. So I said green engine. Ta-da, very complicated, I know.
So what is the Grenjen?
So the Grenjen is a power system, which is meant to accomplish three really important things. When we look at power and power usage around the world, there's really three things that stand out as common between everything, and only three. And that is that A, it has to be plug and play. Any kind of system that's going to conquer the world's problems really has to be something that is free of the need for engineers and technicians, or you can't get to remote and impoverished communities. Two, it had to be scalable because our need for energy increases as we grow. In fact, there's a direct correlation between economic growth and access to energy. And third, it had to be portable because that is just the reality of life today. So when I set out to kind of solve this problem, I realized, well, that didn't include a bunch of things like transmission lines. They were definitely an add-on in some cases, but they weren't something that was required, which said to me that we needed to find a way to create something that was a little bit more user-friendly. And that really brought me back to batteries in particular. And that's really where the journey started.
And so is it a battery?
Yeah, it's actually, it is a battery and more. So it's effectively, it's technology that allows you to charge with anything. So it's input agnostic and it's output agnostic. So you can charge pretty much anything from a cell phone to a city. And in between can be an unknown number of batteries. Now, normally in any type of battery scenario, you would have an engineer who would design the system based on really specific things about what is the energy coming in, what are you charging with, and what are you powering on the other end. And that makes a lot of big decisions. Instead, what we did is we put the engineer inside the box. So you literally can charge it with a hand crank or a hydro dam or the grid. It literally can be charged by anything. It's much more dependent on voltage than it is on the type of input. And its output really, because it is modular, yes, everybody uses the Lego term, so let's say it Lego, like you combine them in any combination to power things. So right now we're doing some work with the Canadian Department of Defense where they have deployable cams. And that's a really good example of how this system can be very effective because they can assemble it at any location without technicians. which gives them a lot of variability and a lot of speed and a lot of other good features.
So some of the challenges that I believe batteries have, and let me see if I know anything about what I'm talking about and how you respond, they tend to be heavy. And so therefore portable is a real issue, unless all they're doing is energizing a flashlight. That they have materials that are scarce and becoming scarcer, and so therefore they're becoming far more expensive. And that they actually, when you do a full cycle counting from a climate standpoint, aren't all that clean, because the trash, the energy to create them, and then the trash to take care of them is complicated. Tell me about that.
So you've got a couple of real big questions there, and I can answer them all, but you might have to remind me of one or two. So let's start off with the weight. So different chemistries have different energy density. So you have different options that are more appropriate in different settings. So for example, if something is stationary, you could use a good old lead acid battery. They don't last overly well, but they're super, super heavy. More likely you'd use something like a lithium iron phosphate. So a 1 kilowatt hour battery, which would be kind of the size you'd see in your car or truck battery. That's about a 1 kilowatt hour battery, and usually in a lead acid would weigh about 80 pounds. In something like a lithium iron phosphate, that would weigh about 20 pounds. In a lithium ion, it would weigh about 12 or 13 pounds. So the energy density makes a big difference based on the chemistry you're using. So different chemistries are often used in different scenarios, which is partly why we designed our system very uniquely to be chemistry agnostic. So we actually, and this was part of the work we did for the military this past fall, was we did our system, and we had systems working together with batteries of different chemistries. So one pack would have lithium iron phosphate, another pack had lithium ion, and another pack had just a good old AA nickel cadmium from Amazon. And all of the batteries could be used together at the same time in the same stack and could be changed in and out. And that's very
different types of batteries. What's the benefit of that?
Well, it actually has to do with part of your second question, or one of the other questions. I don't know the order anymore, but around the recycling and the waste. So one of the things that happens, of course, is, whether intended or not, you've got planned obsolescence in some cases, but you have a lot of waste at the end of a cycle. So now if you have a system that is chemistry tied, if it is tied to a particular chemistry, when the technology advances, say there's a new lithium ion chemistry or a lithium, solid state lithium, or whatever it might be, then you're replacing all of the equipment that was using the previous chemistry, and you start from scratch. By contrast with ours, you simply add on. You only replace that which needs replacing. So if you have components, and again, the military is probably a good example here. If they have, they're always buying these things. So if they have groups of product that is older, they replace only that. If they get a new chemistry, they don't replace the newer versions that they've got that are still mid in their life cycle. Does that make sense?
Yep. And okay. What about price of the components?
Actually, it's not too bad. One of the things that's, again, this kind of goes to the waste part of it. One of the things that happens in the battery storage world that is a really unfortunate technique, I guess, is when you create a battery, they are a combination of multiple cells put together in series or parallel to get a certain capacity and voltage. And 90% probably or more of the manufacturers in the world actually spot weld their cells together. So say a battery had 200 cells. If one cell fails, the entire battery is thrown out. They have no way, the battery has been modified, that cell has been modified with the spot weld, so it can't ever be serviced, and the whole thing is thrown out. By contrast, we don't do that. We actually have a system which is modular, and the cells are individual, and if we need to, we can service any unit, or we can actually identify a single failed cell and replace one cell. So instead of throwing out a battery that has 200 cells, we replace one cell. The other 199 that are still functional are still in use and can be even refurbished with newer cells where needed.
Fantastic. And how are you doing from a business standpoint?
We're starting to get there finally. New tech is always a long road. It's certainly longer than I expected to be when we started off. But once we got our patent secured in the US and we started to get a little bit more recognition, particularly from the military, that really helped us get our feet under us because more people started to take us seriously. So now we're actually doing pretty good. We have a pending, I won't say who, but a pending very large distribution agreement for a residential system in Canada, pending that hopefully should be announced by early next year. And then we have also a couple of major industrial projects, which would be very good demonstration projects.
And these are rechargeable. And you said that they're rechargeable by hand crank or the grid. So like, how does a hand crank recharge them?
So if it's a smaller unit, because it is like Lego, you could think, okay, there are smaller bricks and there are bigger bricks. So something like a hand crank would work for something like an individual dismounted soldier. So if they should be separated and out in a scenario where they have no other charging mechanism, they literally can wind it up and it will give them enough power to power things like communication devices. So for some, that can be life-saving in some scenarios. For others, it might be just the absolute bare minimum that they can manage. But most scenarios, we'd see larger things. We'd see solar panels, grid, charge it and take it with you. That's a great option if you're camping, for example. You don't have to run the loud diesel generator. Just charge it home and take it with you. So there's lots of options.
I understand that solar panels have come down something like 95% in cost. What's happened to batteries?
So batteries is an interesting one. When you read the reports, they're actually quite mixed because they tend to talk about cell manufacturing and battery manufacturing as one. And in fact, they're very distinct things. So cell manufacturing is literally taking the raw materials and putting it into a single cell that often could look something like an oversized AA battery. And then there's battery energy storage systems, which is where we sit, where we're actually doing much more around electronics that control the flow of the electricity between the cells, between input and output. So overall, the materials have come down quite dramatically. One of the biggest things that I find in this industry that's unfortunate, but hopefully is starting to change, is that a lot of the cost and a lot of the waste comes from the fact that about 80% of the world's lithium comes from South America. But South America doesn't produce a single cell. All of it, 100% of their mineral is shipped out of South America to other sources, mostly Asia, where it's then developed into a cell. And then those cells are sold to companies like ours and others that then turn them into battery systems. So a lot of the actual cost comes in the logistics, and so does a lot of the environmental impact. So as we have more development happening in North and South America, where we're starting to see lithium production and extraction here, it actually lowers the overall footprint quite a bit, and it should lower the cost.
Really? That's fascinating. So it's transporting these things from South America to Asia and then back to North America that's adding significantly the cost, particularly when they're so heavy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an enormous part of the cost. And in fact, a lot of the supposed shortage, it's not actually a shortage of lithium, it's a shortage of extracted lithium. So right now, the extraction of the lithium is kind of not kept up with the current demand because of electric vehicles. But of course, that's something that's always, some are coming on and going off at any given time. There's actually a very cool company out of Calgary, Alberta that is doing some work to produce brine-based lithium cells right here in Alberta.
Sorry, what based cells?
Lithium-based cells. So they're extracting lithium from the brine. So brine that was pulled out from other types of work, they're able to pull that water-based or soluble lithium out and turn it into a battery-grade lithium.
And this brine is in Alberta?
Yeah, it's actually throughout the prairies, but Alberta is one of the bigger areas. It's actually a byproduct of some of the oil and gas production. So it was something that oil and gas companies had to hold by law. They couldn't get rid of this stuff. And it turns out it has quite a lot of useful lithium in it if it can be extracted at a cost competitive rate, which this new company is looking to do. And we're working with them on how that could work for our future.
Well, that's interesting. So what have they done with this brine? Is it sitting in puddles somewhere?
It's a combination. I can't speak too much to that because it's really on the other end of the spectrum from us. So it's the company in Calgary that's working on that. They're called LEAP, by the way. But it certainly looks to be that there are holding tanks throughout the prairies and into the United States. They're holding the brine. So yeah, lots of opportunity there.
Absolutely fascinating. With electric cars, aren't we going to need like tons and tons and tons of more batteries?
Yes, we are. We need them in a lot of different capacities. One of the challenges with electric vehicles, of course, and a lot of people will tell you this, is that the grid currently can't really support them. You're charging at a really high voltage and they're really big batteries, and everybody wants to do it at peak time, like dinner time. You get home from work and you're going to plug it in. And we already have problem with peak power. And I'm not sure if you'd be aware of this, Brian, but one of the things with emissions related to the grid is it's actually different emission rates at peak times than it is at non-peak times. So at a non-peak time, often they're using more renewables like wind, solar, etc. But at peak times, they have to turn on what's called a peaker plant. And the peaker plants are almost exclusively like natural gas or coal. And so they actually create more emissions during peak time. So when you add more to that peak load, you actually increase the problem with the grid. And a lot of people, myself included, would say that the solution to this is actually about decentralizing storage. So instead of trying to increase your infrastructure, like increasing your transmission and distribution lines, instead you store energy decentralized so that when the load is very high, you can draw from energy stores that are all over the place. And that actually creates a system where you don't have to spend the potentially billions or even trillions of dollars on infrastructure upgrades.
And how do we do that? Batteries in everyone's house?
It could be in everyone's house. It could be at substations. There's so many different options for that. We're actually building a residential system that we'll be releasing next year that would allow you to do some of this. It kind of home backup. You can do some charging. You've got a little bit of environmental savings, all that good kind of stuff. But it depends on the user and what they're looking for. I mean, battery solutions go from, your tiny little phone backup to things the size of football fields. So it really depends on the circumstance.
Are you a private company or a public company?
Private.
And if we want to follow your exploits and your progress, do you have a website we should direct people to?
Sure, it's Grenjen.com. So Grenjen, Grenjen.com.
We're going to take a break and come back more with about Grenjen.com and Connie Stacey in just a minute. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour, Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Connie Stacey, who is the president of a company in Edmonton, Alberta, that has created a Grenjen, which is a battery, rechargeable, portable, etc., that she thinks it's green and it's going to revolutionize the way we store electricity. And it sounds like a fascinating story, and we're going to be following you and your company with interest. But Connie, I've just got to ask you two questions while I've got you, if I could. I just have interviewed a couple of different people over the course of the last couple of months about the fourth industrial revolution, how critically important understanding technology is, and yet how it's difficult to convince females to get educations in STEM or take jobs in STEM. What do you say to that?
Well, it's a double-edged sword. It's tough to get girls to go into it, and when they don't see role models, it's even tougher. And for a woman in STEM, I can tell you there are a lot of challenges, and a lot of it comes not from, things like overt sexism, but unconscious bias. A lot of the, incubators and things like that I've been through in the last couple of years really talk about how often investors want to see themselves across the table. So you have a natural bias that if the vast bulk of investors are male, then the vast bulk of investment is made to men. And there's actually quite a few studies that have been done on that. There's a great study that was done by a Columbia PhD or professor, and suddenly I can't think of her name, Dana Kantz, something like that, and who actually studied the difference of what happens when you take similar technology in the STEM field and you pitch it, one pitched by a woman and one pitched by a man, and the difference is quite dramatic. And I don't think it's intentional. I think that a lot of people just, they look down the table and they go, that guy reminds me of me when I was a kid. He's got potential, and they just aren't used to seeing as many women in that space. So I think that one of the biggest and most important things we have to do is help get those role models into the field so that the young girls are looking up and going, oh, hey, there are people in this space. Women do this kind of work, and it's rewarding. So I think that's one of the biggest pieces.
You're also a speaker on LGBT issues. Is it challenging to be gay in this sector?
It's challenging to be gay in a lot of things, a lot of sectors, but yes, in this sector, among others, a lot of it really comes in, oh my gosh, in the international part of business for me in particular. In Canada, we're very fortunate. We're quite liberal in our rights and our beliefs. But when I travel internationally, that gets me a whole different scenario. So, you know, in places like Indonesia, I can't safely use public bathrooms. Well, that's an effect to a business trip. And it was the same in India. I can't safely travel in a lot of places because as a woman, I don't necessarily look like most women in those areas look. And they can be pretty harsh about that. So there's always things that have to be worked around. Great strides have been made. And some of the big corporate 500s in particular have really done a good job of stepping up and showing the way with their international presence. And the one that comes to mind in particular is EY. I know that their leadership right from the top has made some really, really positive comments and example. And then you get people working all around the world. Well, that has a pretty big impact with when others can see it.
Connie Stacey, thank you for joining us and telling us about the Grenjen and about your company and about how you think we need to have more green batteries. And you're the founder of Growing Greener Innovations, Inc. You're coming to us from Edmonton, which I thought, out of Alberta was pretty conservative, but you're telling me Edmonton is not?
No, Edmonton is less conservative than Calgary, usually by a long shot. A lot more blue collar in this area than Calgary, and not just because we like our blue Oilers, blue and orange Oilers there, but a lot more of an art city, a lot more culture and support around festivals and things like that. So pretty proud to live here.
Well, thank you for sharing your pride in Edmonton, your pride in the Grenjen, and given that it's Pride Month, thank you for talking a little bit about what the challenges are being gay in your business, and appreciate your honesty and your frankness and your openness.
Well, thanks again for having me.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Good night.